That was today's guest, Renée Benmeleh, singing in Hebrew and Greek a Romaniot song, Adone Ata Yadala. O Lord, let not my soul be lost in the world. The original Hebrew and Greek transliteration is by Mariansala Hatzistamatiu, from Unknown Musical Treasures of the Jewish Tradition of Greece at the Jewish Museum of Thessaloniki. Renée sings an alternate version by Sakis Negri. Yassas. Welcome to Greek Like Me, the podcast about all things Greek. I'm your host, Pamela Diodes Wood. Email us at stealthgreek@gmail.com to share comments, questions, and stories about Greeks, Greekness, or your own ethnic background. In our January 25th episode, we recognized the Greek Jews in the Holocaust and the horrific situations they faced. Today, Renée shares stories about her family who lived the nightmare of the Nazi persecution in Greece, particularly her incredibly fierce Yiayia Renée. Yiayia Renée and Papu Vital provided testimony to the Shoah Foundation, founded by Steven Spielberg in 1994 at the University of Southern California. The Foundation's purpose is preserving audiovisual recordings of the shared experiences of Holocaust survivors. The Foundation Library contains over 56,000 testimonies, recorded in 65 countries in 44 languages. Renée refers to these testimonies as she shares her family stories. At one point in her interview, she mentions asking her Yiayia what's on her arm. Because imparting world history has become increasingly challenging in the United States, I want to remind listeners. The Nazis tattooed identification numbers on the arms of every victim seized and transported for forced labor to the concentration camps where so many died. Renée was born in Venezuela of Greek and Mediterranean ancestry. She's a multicultural vocalist, composer, vocal improv facilitator, and drum circle facilitator. She's a singer steeped in world, jazz, improv, and ritual music. She's the founder of Sound Nourishment, where she leads group workshops supporting vocal and rhythmic exploration. We spoke by Zoom some weeks back, and what follows are hair-raising, triumphant stories of survival. I'm so grateful because this is emotional, heavy stuff, and yet at the same time, from what you told me of the stories earlier, it's awesome. They're awesome stories, and they're kind of uplifting and they're fun, which is a really crazy thing to say about.
No, it is. Can I just read you something really quick?
Sure.
This is a poem that a friend of mine just shared with me. I want a word that means okay and not okay. More than that, a word that means devastated and stunned with joy. I want the word that says, I feel it all at once. The heart is not like a songbird singing only one note at a time, more like a Tuvan throat singer able to sing both a drone and simultaneously 2 or 3 harmonics high above it. A sound, the Tuvans say, that gives the impression of wind swirling among rocks. The heart understands swirl, how the churning of opposite feelings weaves through us like an insistent breeze, leads us wordlessly deeper into ourselves. and blesses us with paradox, so we might walk more openly into this world so rife with devastation, this world so ripe with joy. Isn't that something?
That's perfectly describing what I was trying to say. That it was
Yeah.
hard and emotional and devastating, but at the same time crazy and funny and
Yeah. This is Rosemary Watola Traumer. Because we're feeling a lot of this in general with Israel and Gaza, with lots of things, so this is where, thanks for letting me share that.
My pleasure. Okay, I'd like you to start by telling us a little bit about where your family's from. I thought maybe Athens because you sent me a picture of the Meladoni Street synagogue. And I thought, oh my God, that's Athens.
That is exactly where they're from, although my papu, Vital Benmeleh, was born in Bursa, Turkey. When he was 8 years old, his family moved to Athens. Yeah. But my grandmother, my Yiayia, Renée Benmeleh, maiden name was Hesurun. She was born in Greece, in Athens.
And her parents?
As far as I know, from Greece.
She was definitely Greek.
She was definitely Greek on so many levels.
I'd like you to tell us a little bit about her story.
Well, first, I'd like to tell you how I first learned her story. I was 8 or 9. At this point, they had migrated to the United States, which was in the late it was like 1980. Okay. And I was with her. I would spend my summers with my Yiayia and my father, my Greek side. We had moved to California, so I would spend my summers there. And we were eating at the little kitchen table. And I said, "What's on your arm? What is that?" And she, for some reason, thought that I was, I don't know, mature enough to handle some information. And she started to tell me what the Holocaust was, what happened. And of course, I don't remember all the details of that day, but there were just a few little things that she had shared in that moment that stood out, painful moments that she shared and that I always remembered. And then later, I was able to hear more of her story in more detail. She cried, and the two, I guess I'll just share the two things that were particularly, that really stood out that day were that when she had stolen a potato, which she had shared that the Germans would have, I don't know if I've got this correct, but it was like they would have them put the potatoes like under the earth so they wouldn't freeze. And every now and then, people who were in the camp would just try to steal some food, of course. And she stole a potato, and she had like a system for hiding things when she would try to steal food. But this time it didn't work out, and they found it, and they just beat the hell out of her with a club.
Oh, and this was in Auschwitz?
She was in Auschwitz Birkenau, which is where from what I understand, the most of the gas chambers were. In addition to camps, work camps. But she was beat. And she told me that she has always had neck and back problems as a result of this. She said he beat her so hard. she couldn't get up for 3 hours off the floor.
Oh my Lord.
And so there's that incident. And then she also told me, and she didn't say this in her testimonial, which was interesting, but she told me personally that there was a 5-year-old. And this was rare because in her testimonial, she had said that majority of children were just gassed immediately. If you couldn't work, gone. If you were an elder or a child, gone. If you could work, then you went to the camp to work, But somehow there was this 5-year-old who I guess the mother had died. It was an orphan. And my Yiayia said that she would share food with this little child. But she told me that one day they took the child to the camp, and she cried. She cried so much when she told me this. She still felt in her heart this sense of like, not just a befriending, but a mothering, of this child and the pain that she felt. So that was the beginning of the story. And later, as I got older, I got curious. I got more curious. And I was like, what is all this stuff she's talking about, And she really made it her mission to make sure that people learned about what happened. And so she never held this back,
Good for her.
And yeah, and at the end of her testimonial, she even says, always tell this story. Never let it be lost, because all beings should know, that this happened so that it never happens again, because we can see that there are ways that it is still, there are threads of that are still in our society. And this was, when she said this, it was in 1994, when her testimonial, and she was just so grateful for the work of Steven Spielberg to be able to document, and then one year I had said, I didn't know about the Shoah project, but one day I said, well, why don't you write a book? And she said, well, I'll write a book if you come here and live with me. And it was not the right time for me to be able to do that. I was in college. There were a lot of other factors. She was in Florida. I was in California. But then one day she called me and she said, Steven Spielberg is coming to my house. That's how she said it.
Wow.
Of course, it wasn't Steven Spielberg. It was the team. But, that was like, I was like, what? What do you mean? And she explained to me. And so then shortly after that, I was able to view the testimonial. And I wasn't able to be there. There was a little section at the end where it showed the family that was there, which was my father, whose name is Peter Benmeleh, my uncle, Maurice Benmeleh, and their 2 children, Daniel and Karen, and then my papu, Vital Benmeleh. So they had a little cameo of them speaking a little bit about, what it was like. And I wasn't there, but I sent her a video of my own response, so she could have it. And I've watched the testimonial 3 times now. And, with different capacity of integration, let's put it that way.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. All I can say is that, as I mature and as I get older, I am able to interpret, feel the testimony in different ways, observe her, interpret her energy, her heart, all of it. And what I got this last time watching it was how grounded and genuine she was, and how many details she remembered. I thought, that was 40 years before. They were asking her things like, what was the name of the barrack that you were in? I mean, the number of the barrack. And she knew. She would just answer these things like, boom. They were asking her dates. She knew the exact date to the day when certain things happened. And I thought, wow, how does she remember all that? And I imagine it's just something that's burned in your mind, in your heart.
That must have been part of a survival mechanism too, to try to, because you didn't have anything else around to stimulate you. There was no music and book reading and proper social intercourse. It's a whole different way of keeping track of what's going on in your life. And such
Yeah.
horrific events must have been burned
Yes.
into her memory.
Well, yes. And this is something that, I'm glad you mentioned the music and the lack of music. She mentioned Dr. Mengele.
Oh gosh.
And I have to tell you, I could not get 100% clear if she was subjected or if she was not subjected. In the testimony, it was like not totally clear to me. But what she was sharing is that the only music was for him. Because as you know, a lot of Jews who were musicians got to save their lives because they happened to be able to play music for the Germans,
Right.
right? I can't even imagine. I mean, I just want to say, as a musician, the thought of betraying myself makes me want to vomit. I can't imagine. I can understand making the choice, like, this is going to save our lives. But gosh, we have to play this music that we don't give a shit about. That not only do we not give a shit about it, but it's like music that is, supportive of the the vision and the mission. I mean, I just can't even imagine what that's like. But that's what she shared. That was the only music, and she said it hurt her heart deeply that she couldn't listen to music. She loved, loved, loved music, you know. And it was so interesting to, again, hearing the testimony this time around, I heard things I didn't hear before. And she said, music nourishes the soul, and she missed this greatly. And the reason that this stood out for me is because not only do I know this, but without remembering this statement, in 2020, I changed my music business name to Sound Nourishment.
It made an
And
impression on you.
somewhere in my unconscious, because I
Yeah.
didn't remember, I do know that sound is nourishing. I know this, but I didn't realize that she thought of it that way. I didn't realize that it wasn't just like a fun thing for her. Like, she really was like, music is nourishment, like a basic essential nutrient. So that was just such a beautiful moment of connection for
Yeah.
me.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, did she ever talk about what life was like before and leading up to the Germans?
Yeah, she did. She said that there was some camouflaged anti-Semitism,
Yeah.
but she said that, you know, for the most part, relations between Christians and Jews were pretty good, at least where she was, um, and that many went on to help the Jews. You know, she was getting ready to go to college. She wanted to study medicine.
Wow.
But once she returned, she met her husband, had children, and she felt like it was too late. But she was a volunteer for the Red Cross, and that's one of the images that I had sent you. It's a whole
Yeah.
group, Um,
Was this at the start of the war?
it was before that. Just before that, she mentioned that these are the dates she mentioned. She said it was 1941 when the prohibitions had started in Athens. And then she said it was in 1943 they told the Jews they were going to give them. Well, let me go back for a second and just say that her father was religious. They observed Shabbat. They went to temple, and there's two temples, two synagogues. They're both called Melitoni, but 8 Melitoni Street, from what I understand, was a Romaniot Jewish synagogue, and 5 Melitoni Street was for the Sephardic Jews. So that's the one that they belonged to. That's the one that they went to.
Interesting. I didn't realize that there were two, because of the story that I related about the Nazis forcing the Jews to gather in the Melodoni synagogue. I didn't realize there were two.
Well, it may be that back then there may not have been two. With my grandfather, because I wasn't able to hear his testimony this time, there was a problem with the website. I don't remember that much. He wasn't as forthright sharing his story, except for one time about 5 years before he died, where he took me aside and he shared a number of different things about his role. And I can share a little bit more about that, but I don't know much about what his life was like, except that I know that he worked in textiles. I thought that he was a friend of the family. Like he was in the Jewish community, you know.
They knew each other.
They knew each other, but distantly, sort of, they were acquaintances or something. What she had said was that the way that they got sort of trapped, if you will, was that the Germans had started to offer goods like sugar and other goods that are for Passover, which would be not non-leavened goods and stuff like that. Her father went to get some goods. He fell for it, like many did, and they got him.
Oh gosh.
At that point, when he didn't come back, she went to look for him. So that was the turning point of her life. She didn't want to be without her father, and she thought, I can find him, I can get him. She was 20. She was 20 years old. And that's, they got her. And at some point, the whole family went into hiding in the mountains. I think it was before this time of this incident. They'd gone into hiding into the mountains. She said it was around 1942. They stayed there for about a year, but her and her father were taken in 1943. So they'd already been gone from their home, and when the neighbors knew that they left, they started stealing their things.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
Good Lord.
I don't know how much detail you want me to share here.
Whatever's important to you, because all these little details are making her so real and tangible, and that's part of the story, is that these aren't just numbers, these are people who went through this.
Absolutely. And that is one of the comments she made in her testimonial. She said, I was no longer a person, I was a number. I was just one number. Yeah. So, this piece I think is important. It's something that a lot of people didn't know, but I'm pretty sure that you mentioned it in your podcast, that there was this camp called Haidari.
Yeah.
Haidari in Greece, that was set up, by the Germans. And when her and her father were captured, they were taken to a jail cell, basically, at this camp. She believed there were approximately 5,000 Jews at Haidari.
My Lord.
Around there. That was her estimation. One thing that she said was so strange. They would dig these holes for people to do their human waste, right? And in there, they would also put anything they found on the body of the Jews, like gold and diamonds. They would put it inside the human waste hole. And I don't know why or what that was about, but I would think they would take it. But that was just a really strange thing that she shared.
A way to sort of beat them down and humiliate them.
Exactly. That's exactly what I think too. Yeah. Yeah. So she said they were there for 8 days. And that on April 2nd, 1943, they put them on a train and they separated all the men and women, regardless of family affiliation. She still tried to go with her father because she felt that he was dying. Somehow she had some conversation with a guard. I don't know what it was. You know, I think the relationships were so strange. You know, there was like, you could come upon a guard who maybe had some kind of affiliation with some aspect and or knew her or something, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know how, but he let her. And because she'd been a volunteer for the Red Cross, somebody gave her a little bit of food and some clothing. She could have left her father, but she chose to stay with him. She said some of her other family members were there as well. She said 3 aunts and 2 uncles and her grandmother. Her grandmother's name was Gilda, and that would be Jesurun. At that point, it took 11 days to travel to Poland from Athens. And this is a piece of information that is, again, you know, things get shared from one person to the other. I have a testimonial from her brother Ralph, who shared it with his nephew about 5 or 6 years ago. Before he just died in the last year, but 5 or 6 years ago, he shared this, and it was a pretty detailed story about what, you know, life was like for him. He shared some interesting things, such as, you know, kids would play on the street with things that were, you know, items that children should not be playing with.
These were the kids playing on the Athens streets or in the camps?
No, my uncle Ralph did not go to a camp.
Okay.
Yeah. What I wanted to tell you that I thought was interesting, here we go. Okay. He said, I don't remember everyday details other than we did not have enough to eat. And for months, we ate roasted chickpeas every day.
Wow.
I had friends to play with, and playing we did in the streets. Our favorite game was bullets, where we lined up the bullets we found in the hills.
Oh my God.
This is now when they were hiding in the hills at this point in the mountains. Live bullets, not shells, which had not fired correctly and were discarded by he used the word stukas, airplanes, and other fighting. We lined them up, each kid pitching in his share. We took turns throwing a larger bullet at the lineup, and the ones we knocked down were ours. Another game we played was to light a fire, put some bullets in an old frying pan, place the frying pan on the fire, hide, and listen to them firing from the heat.
Oh my gosh.
Some kids played with hand grenades that they found. Some blew their brains out.
Oh my God.
Yeah, just to imagine, like, we're kids, like, they got nothing to play with. All their toys or whatever are back in some other place that they abandoned, and they're entertaining themselves, you know?
And that there are so many bullets and grenades and whatnot laying around for them to get into.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to say that he also shares, we're talking about Ralph now, her brother, who was in hiding, but she was gone at this point. And he says, one day, my brother and 2 cousins, Elias and Jake, came to our house carrying a large sack full of hand grenades. You see, they were members of the underground fighting the Germans.
Oh, wow.
By coincidence, my other sisters, in an attempt to comfort my mother, had given her a letter pretending that Renee had sent it. So Renee now being my Yiayia. They wanted her mother to feel comfort
Oh,
that she was
gosh.
still alive. So they created this letter, right? The writing was very faint, depicting that it had traveled far. Mom assumed that Renee was okay and well in Poland, which of course never could have happened.
No, my Lord.
In a million years would they have been able to write a letter to a family member.
No, or be okay.
Or be okay. I mean, what is okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, by coincidence, the next morning, the Germans, along with the Greek collaborators, were looking for British spies entering and searching all houses. We got ready for the visit and made a plan. The three men and the sack of grenades would descend into the crawl space via the trapdoor in the middle of the floor. My mother placed a rug over the trapdoor to hide it, and a table on top of the rug, concealing everything. Sure enough, the intruders came in, searching the house, and found the letter from Renee under the mattress, but it was so faint they couldn't read it. My other sisters had done a good job faking the writing. Sure enough, all did not go well. They found the three men's coats hanging by the door and asked me whose they were and why they hadn't taken their ID papers with them. I told them that they had gone to the beach, a fib which they bought. In the meantime, my cousin Jake had to defecate, sending the odor straight up through the cracks of the floor and the trap door.
Oh, my
We got
Lord.
scared. But luckily, the odor was not noticed by anyone. So, I mean, there's so much here. I will just say a little more about Ralph. He was able to stay and not go to a camp. His older sister Claire and her husband Jack and their two children Elvira and Victor had made arrangements to emigrate to the United States. So him and his mother Susie had decided to follow suit. So eventually they migrated to Baltimore, and that's where he died less than a year ago. He ended up working in. He went to the Polytechnic Institute. He met a beautiful girl named Renate. They married. They had a child named Maurice. Um, and yeah, eventually he worked in IT and data processing before he died. But so just to say a little bit more about Ralph, he was the youngest of all the children, and probably one of the pictures that you see with this young kid. I didn't realize it was him, but I mean, it was just such a kind of a big.
A big family portrait.
Yeah, but just a big gap between and then suddenly there was this younger child.
Yeah.
I guess to share maybe a little bit more about her experience in the camp.
Yeah, please.
Um, she got typhus, which was not uncommon, um, and interestingly, in her sharing her testimony, she actually feels that may have saved her. She had typhus. I mean, she was able to recover from typhus at some point, but then she got it again. It was like a resurgence of it. But she feels like it saved her because she said that when the Russians came and she was just about to die, they just let her. They just didn't. They just let her rest, and the rest of the people were taken to a forest and killed.
Oh, my
You know,
God.
the people in like her immediate block. So I don't know. There are many stories that she shares where she feels like she had these moments of, she would call them blessings from God, miracles from God that happened. One of the ones that she shared is that there was a whole group of people had been told that the Red Cross was coming to rescue them. And they were just desperate to get on this bus to be rescued. But she didn't make it on because so many of them, it was full, and she didn't make it on.
And where was this? This was in Athens?
No, this was at the camp.
This was at the camp? Oh, a bus came to the camp.
Yeah, when you hear the end of the story, you'll understand. They were told this. All these people go. She doesn't make it on. She's crying, so sad. And it wasn't the Red Cross. They were constantly setting them up.
Yeah, this is what I read. It was do something that seems kind, or do something that seems as if there's a way out, and then just do horrible things to people, kill people.
Just complete. It's
sadistic,
evil.
Incredibly sadistic
and evil. It turned out they were all going to the gas chambers.
Oh my God!
I thought about that moment. I thought, oh my God, my very existence is due to the fact that moment she didn't go to the gas chamber.
She didn't make it on that bus.
I mean, so many moments, but that was one moment where I thought, my dad never would have been born. I never would have been born,
Oh gosh, it's like chills just thinking about the close call.
Yeah. But anyway, I can share a little bit more. This is straight out of her testimony. Her work was to collect the potatoes and put them under the earth in order to preserve them in the cold. The Germans often would order dogs. They were just, sadistic is the word, to bite them, to just make their life more and more miserable in any way that they could, They got soup for a 30-minute break midday. Morning was a half a cup of coffee. So here's these people, they're emaciated already.
Yeah.
And they're working, 8 to 9 hours a day because they have to walk, walking from where they sleep, if you could even call it sleep. I don't even know what it was, to the site and then back, Mm-hmm. She worked there 18 months. This is Auschwitz-Birkenau. One day, she found toothpaste. There were just all kinds of random things, that people would find. And inside, she noticed it was hard. There was a hidden ring with a gem.
Oh my God. Somebody had hidden their jewel.
She traded it with someone she thought she might be able to trust for 4 pieces of bread and butter. And that person betrayed her. And this was another beating. And it's interesting because obviously the ring was, taken, but she thought she could go back and see if the ring was still there in the bathroom after she, went through that. But anyway, they started to get wind of her and they were tracking her pretty well. She was definitely one of those people that was constantly trying to take things and figure out. Yeah. I mean, I imagine many of them were, but she said many folks just committed suicide by going to the electric wires. They were just like, I'm done. I'm out. She didn't want to commit suicide. She just kept saying, I don't want to commit suicide. But she said that when the order came to kill Hitler towards the end of the war, she thought, if they're going to gas me, I will electrocute myself in order to die more quickly. And she said this was around the beginning of 1945. There were definitely moments she thought she might die. Not that she wanted to, but because just her health was so ailing, between being, 80 pounds, weighing like 80 pounds, and typhus,
Starvation, the beatings. My gosh. And it seems almost as if the fact that she was showing any kind of spirit, that she still had a desire to live,
yes,
was what was pissing them off.
Totally. And the more I share, the more you're gonna just be like, oh my God, was she for real? I mean, the things that she's, shared with me. Um, she just said many of her friends, when they were released, had died because the desperation to eat. They didn't realize that they should eat very little and slowly.
Yeah.
And it was just too much for their bodies. Their bodies couldn't take it, you know. Um, she mentioned gypsies. She said they were almost always killed immediately.
Wow.
That's another, aspect of the Holocaust population that you don't hear very much about.
Yeah, right.
You know, um, I don't have historical background to know what countries they came from. I'm sure they came from many European countries, though. So this next section is a little bit more about what happened when she was released. She left in the same clothes that she wore in the camp, right? It was these striped work outfits.
Yeah.
And it was she said it was the Russians who helped their release. At one point, she had nowhere to go. She just slept on the street. But again, the Red Cross came and rescued her. She was in a refugee camp for 40 days and she got typhus again.
Oh my God.
So they took her from, I think what she said is there was a camp that the Red Cross set up in Salonika.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were able to go back to Athens. She was like a cadaver of 80 pounds. She said the doctor didn't even x-ray me to look at my bones. He just had me get naked and looked at my bones through my skin. He literally said to her, I don't need to x-ray you.
Oh,
I mean, can you imagine? I just like,
that's so horrifying.
she was at the hospital in Salonika for a week. And then at the hospital in Athens, it took her 3 months to recover.
She was strong.
She was strong. I'm sorry, some of my facts are kind of jumping back and forth.
Don't
But
worry. That's fine.
yeah,
It's understandable.
on the way out of the camp, they traveled on a train to Greece. I said that already. She said the train broke down in Czechoslovakia and they stopped for an hour to repair it. And she thought, well, I'm going to go find some white bread. She said she really missed eating white bread, and she missed the train. And she was just bereaved. So I can't believe I just left to go get, and the train left. And this man found her and he took her to this, place with a group of other people, fed her. And after 40 days, she was able to return home. When she was in the hospital, so she said her family was very well known in the Jewish community. So there were lots of people coming to visit her and bringing her flowers and gifts and food. And Vitali, my papu, who was a acquaintance, came to see her a lot. And he kept visiting her, and little by little, they became more acquainted and they were engaged. She said June 13th, 1946. My father was born in Athens. He was born on October 23rd, 1948. And in 1949, they moved to Caracas, Venezuela, because they wanted to be closer to the United States, where most of her family had migrated. But it was 30 years before they could move to the U.S.
Wow.
Yeah. They both, I don't know if it was a citizenship issue or just survival. My uncle Morris was born in Venezuela. They both worked. Yiayia and my papa both worked. He was in tech. He was, he's continued to work in textiles, and she sewed by hand, as like she was like a tailor, until they could buy an electric machine. So this is now 1940s, early 1950s. I want to just name some names of her family. Her father, first of all, she told me her uncle. The story that my uncle Ralph had told was that it was my grandfather, Renee's father, who was dying on the train and was on her lap dying. And then he was saying a prayer for the dying, that he was speaking about somebody else, but that it was he who was dying. That was the story he told. And when I read that story, I sobbed and sobbed. I thought, oh, how could, oh my God, how I couldn't even imagine like having your father die on your lap like that, you know?
I know that she was so devoted to him that she even put herself in danger to be with him.
Totally did. She did. But her story was different. Her story was not that it was her father. She knew he was dying. But when that happened, the facts are a little bit different. She said the prayer was for her uncle who had died on the train. That he had said the prayer for his brother. You know? So I don't know that I'll ever know the what exactly happened there. Because so not only has my Yiayia crossed over, but my Papu has crossed over, and all of her brothers and sisters have now. So I have no way to go back and, check those facts.
Yeah.
Unless there's somebody, a grandchild, or even my own father has died. I don't know who would know, but anyway, her father's name was Moses, and her mother was Bona. And as I shared, her grandmother was Gilda. Her father's aunt was Sharina, and her sisters were Rosa, Gilda, Cherry, Judy, and Susie. And her brothers were Ralph and Jose, and all of them have now crossed over. She shared that her tattoo number was 77041. And the piece that I really, really want to share here, that this time listening back struck me so intensely, is how she always believed she would live. And she used to tell me this. She'd say, everybody thought I was crazy because I said I'm going to live. And she told me a story, and I almost wish people could see her telling the story, because when I tell you the story, and when anybody hears it, I can imagine they would go, there's no way that could have happened. It's just not possible. But even she knew how crazy it was. Like, even she telling the story goes, you think I'm crazy, don't you?
Yeah.
No, you must think I'm crazy, but I swear on my parents' graves that this is what happened. And she said, it was snowing one day, and it was towards the end of her time at the camp. She said it was snowing one day, and I looked around, and the snow just looked like snow. She said, but the snow around me was in the shape of a Star of David. And she literally said to the interviewer and me, I know that sounds so crazy, but that's what I saw. That's what I saw. And, it's very possible when somebody, it's very possible that it really did happen. And it's also very possible that when somebody is in that level of malnutrition, and you see things you want to see, there could be hallucinations, but whatever it was, to her, it was a sign. Yeah, it was a sign for her. And this is the other thing that she said. She said she never thought she would die, even though there were moments when she was ill, but she never thought she's going to die in a gas chamber, you know? And this is so unbelievable to me, because today we talk about the law of attraction. You know, you don't say all the Jews attracted that into their energy field because of something that's happening inside of them. It really relates for me to what she said.
Mm-hmm.
And what she said is she always dreamed and visualized that she was home with her mother all the time. All the time. She had the vision, I'm home with my mother.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, I could imagine what a comforting thought in the midst of this fucking insanity that you're living in,
Yeah.
this chaos, this what are the words, you know?
Abject
But
evil. Yeah. Mm.
abject evil. How easy it would be, how easy and natural and normal it would be to be totally disillusioned, depressed, and wanting to just die.
The
And never think.
despair. It seems like she never gave in to the terror or the despair.
How did she do that? I do not know. I do not know. I'm a highly sensitive person. I don't know that world that well. You know, I mean, I've made it through some really insane shit in my life. I will tell you this. I am a strong survivor the way she is. But I succumb to despair probably much more easily than, you know. So to hear her say, I always just dreamed and visualized. And then she said, you must always dream and hold your courage and everything will realize. I, that is my Yiayia right there.
Very much ahead of her time.
I know. Right? I was like, really? I literally, when I heard this the other day in the testimonial, I was just like bent over going, no way. I cannot believe she just said that. Oh my God. This is what these people are talking about, you know, when they talk about, you know, shift your mindset.
Yeah.
And all will realize, and these are not new concepts. These are concepts, you know, going back to Nikola Tesla and all kinds of like really interesting scientists. I mean, this is quantum physics.
My God. And she was just living it. She was just
She was just
naturally.
living it.
Yeah.
And so part of how that, you know, once she had crossed over and I had talked with her auntie, her sister, who's my auntie, Susie Hesunum, who died, may her memory be for a blessing. She died about a year and a half ago. And she sounded just like my Yiayia in that Greek way that they spoke was so. So I remember sitting on the phone and just having all this longing in my heart. I'm like, oh my God, she sounds just like her. I just want to like curl up next to her right now.
Oh.
You know, just like the yum.
Yeah.
And I said, tell me something. So before she went to the Holocaust, was she as playful as she was after? And she goes, oh yeah, she was always like that. I'm like, how could she have kept that after that experience?
Yeah. I wonder.
And I could only imagine it was just sheer gratitude for having lived. For every moment, my God, I'm alive. I have a family. I've got food. Life goes on. I'm going to enjoy it to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
You know, she said her dream was to go back to the camp and pray for all the souls who perished and that were there.
Memory eternal. Yeah.
And I don't believe that she had a chance to do that I'm aware of. And when I heard that in this last testimony, I was like, okay, I know what I need to do now.
You're going to go.
I'm going to go. I'm gonna do it for her, because I've been, this is where I've wanted to go, but I've been so scared. Like, just,
And just horrific. I don't think I'd be that brave to be able to go
I
to
mean,
that
I
place.
know I can handle it, but I may want to go with somebody, you know,
Yeah.
uh, I will cry a lot. That's all I can say. I will cry a lot. I might even become nauseated. It will trigger trauma inside my body. I know
Yeah.
it will.
How could it not?
I have a lot of tools. I have a lot of really good tools, you know. But I'm gonna fulfill that for her.
Oh, that's amazing.
I'm gonna fulfill that for her. Yeah, I will make it there. And I have a feeling I can come up with somebody in my Jewish circle who may want to come with
I'll
me.
go with you. Yeah.
We can support each other to have the experience. You know, when I was talking the other day with this lovely man at the Shoah Foundation, he kept asking a question that was so brilliant. He kept saying, "How do you prepare?" He said, "How do you prepare to watch the video?" And then when we were talking about, he said, "Have you ever gone?" I said, "No, I haven't. I'd like to." He said, "How do you prepare?" That's a
How,
brilliant question.
how do you? How do you? I know how my husband and I felt as we were watching some of the documentaries and how hard it was. But in addition to have a familial connection to that, that is so overwhelming. But if you've got half her moxie, I don't doubt that you will get there. You will absolutely get there.
I've got half her moxie big time. She is so in me. I'm very brave. I'm a very brave person. In fact, when I'm not able to put my bravery into action, I suffer. In other words, it's like my ancestral assignment, and it's part of my life mission to be brave, to face the things that are scary, because I don't know why. It's just how I'm wired. It's how I was formed, you know? But I have to say, this is probably a big part of it, is the influence of her, and how close we were, you know? The extent to which we got to visit something that gave us some level of education about it was that in Miami Beach, there's a Holocaust memorial that is outdoors. It's a series of sculptures of humans. And then there's a wall with names. But the most impactful, I would say, and eerie aspect of it is this tunnel. And you go, and at the very top are the names of all the camps. And then I don't remember what's underneath. There may be some images or something. You walk through, and then you end up at this spot where there are other images with, you know, historical information. And my Yiayia took me there. We cried together. And I have since gone back on my own. I was able to go back and take some photos and document, you know, what it looked like, and share it on social media. Let people know, hey, this museum is here. You can go and see it. You know,
And more importantly, experience it, because I think it's very easy for some people to downplay what happened, or and want to downplay what happened. But I think when you're really faced with the images and the names and the facts, that's why it needs to be required as part of the education of everybody to
a
know that this
hundred
really happened.
percent,
Yeah.
100%. And the movement in this country to shut that down is
Terrifying, frankly.
it's terrifying. It's disgusting. It is. It leaves me speechless. That I don't have any words. We also know that there's a movement to shut down the history of African American people,
Yeah.
and I feel the same way. It's terrifying and disgusting.
And indigenous people and anybody else who, yeah.
Absolutely. Who we don't want to hear their stories. The level of perhaps guilt, white guilt, that can arise, and not knowing what to do with that. What do we do with this? And if there's a feeling on the other end, because there's righteous anger, the misunderstandings have happened in that it's not that somebody is saying, I want you to hear this, and now I want you to feel really, really bad and feel guilty about something that you didn't personally do. No, 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 no. Hang on. What we want is we want the truth. I say we, even though, yes, my family's Jewish. We had the Holocaust experience. So there's that. I happen to be queer. So I had my share of that painful experience growing up, not feeling seen, accepted, and cared for. So I can connect on different levels. But I say we because I include myself in the movement of wanting all of this, the Holocaust, the history of all indigenous people, to be known, heard, felt, and grieved, and grieved. And then you're left with, so what can I do? Well, then we can turn our focus towards reparation to the best of our ability. And who is one of the best examples? Germany. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I literally found out 2 weeks ago that my Moroccan uncle, Elias, was in Israel. He did not have to go to Israel and fight in the IDF. He did not have to. He chose to. This was now in the 1960s, probably. And while he was there, and then he went to a kibbutz, he met his current wife, who was German, who went to work in a kibbutz as a way of offering reparations.
Wow.
I never knew this about her. I was so impressed. I was, oh my God. And that's how they met.
Wild.
So I feel like going forward, when they say we must not forget, and people are like, oh, we know about the Holocaust, da, 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 da. Hello, look at what we're living with right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anti-Semitism is fully alive in our country and in other countries too.
Yeah. It's true. And that's it. The responsibility isn't so much for, oh, you were responsible for what happened. You were responsible for making sure it never happens again. That's where our responsibility lies.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And what does that mean for an everyday person? That means that you stand up, you stand with courage. And these are the people, this way of being an ally. I mean, this is what we hear about in the war. People took people in and hit them, even though they knew that if they did that, they would just be firing squad. These allies, bless them.
That's it. But the more people who stand up and do it, then they're the majority instead of the minority. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us today about you? And I feel like we need to continue this discussion again another time because I feel like you're such a font of information that just humanizes it because we're taking real people and we're learning about real people and their lives. And then they matter. It's very easy to say numbers don't matter, but real people matter. And that's why your stories are so very important. And I think you will have a lot more to tell if you want to.
Yeah. I would be more than happy to come back. I think the last thing I want to say is the main piece that really stood out for me when my papu said, sit down, I want to tell you a story, was I stole the Torah from the temple. Yes, he said he stole the Torah from the temple, which just in itself, if he had been found out, they would have killed him immediately. Because he knew they were coming to destroy the temple.
Plus, they were, as we had spoken about before, the Nazis were gathering up and stealing all artifacts to create their bizarro museum of the hopefully soon to be extinct race. So for anybody to claim it, that it really belonged to claim it, must have been completely offensive to the most offensive of people, the Nazis. But I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I'm so glad you said that. Absolutely. So he stole it and he kept it in his home. And since he had not, I don't know, because, and this is where if I come back, I can talk more about my grandfather's story, because
Sure.
I don't know if he had to relocate and he took the Torah with him, or if they were just able to stay in their home the whole time. I'm not sure that part of the story because I don't remember. But what I can tell you is that he held on to it. And he went back when they rebuilt the temple and he gave it to the rabbi. And the rabbi said to him, and my grandfather, my papu, said this with this really like kind of big smile on his face, like, because he knew. And he said, your life will be blessed forever for what you did.
Oh my gosh.
You know, and he just looked at me and smiled. He goes, and it has been.
Wow, it really has.
Yeah.
And the tremendous risk that he took, even putting his hands on it, never mind holding on to it throughout the entire war. That's something.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like if I do come back, I could delve a little bit more deeply into the story of my papu.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, and also, I spent 3 years in a Holocaust legacy group. So all of us had grandparents that were in the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And the deep dive of addressing intergenerational trauma was really, really good for me. And it helped me understand different aspects of my family a lot.
And this could be helpful to all Greeks because there's quite a bit of intergenerational trauma from that, from occupation to world wars, to Balkan wars, to civil wars, to military junta. These are important stories to tell that we can all gain something from.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for responding to me on Instagram. And I said,
My pleasure.
I want to do something on Greek Jews. And it's so important to me that, yeah, these stories are heard.
Yeah, they need to be heard. And I have heard so little about the Greek Jews. The Greek Jews were there, and they still are there, and they went through the same thing that the rest of the Jews that we have heard about in our history classes. And we need to remember them, all of us, especially the Greeks, need to remember what happened there. So I thank you so much for talking about your family's stories, and I hope you will feel like coming back and talking again.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to come back. And thank you. Thank you for just, being so welcoming and for your sensitivity around all of it as well.
My pleasure, Renee, really. It was very special to be able to be included in these, to be able to listen to you tell the stories.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Elie Wiesel said, human suffering anywhere concerns men and women everywhere. Thanks for listening. Greek Like Me is a Stealth Greek production. I'm your host, Pamela Deodes Wood. Our producer, photographer, and post-production editor is Douglas John. Many thanks to Renée Benmeleh for sharing her time and her family stories. May their memories be eternal. Visit our website at stealthgreek.com for resources, photos, links, and more. Please rate, like, and subscribe. It helps us get noticed so we can keep making content about Greeks and Greek culture. Find Greek Like Me on Facebook or on Instagram at Greek_like_me. See you next time. Yassas.